Hello everyone, and welcome back to another solo spooky story. My name is Rob, and today I'll be your host. For anyone that isn't familiar with how these solo episodes work, these are shorter episodes where myself or Suze might talk about a topic that interests us, something that doesn't feature on the main episodes, and they're generally just kind of shorter in nature, kind of, between 10 and 20 minutes. We'll just talk about something that we're particularly interested in, and we'll present it more as just kind of a narrative rather than a kind of conversation. So yeah, we'll just get right into today's episode. So what I'm talking about today is actually something we've kind of touched on before, I think maybe in previous episodes. I can't actually quite remember. But the whole phenomenon of these like black dogs, it kind of covers both Irish and UK folklore. And today we'll be kind of zoning in on the UK folklore. But growing up as a child, I did frequently kind of hear stories of black dogs in Ireland, and that, they generally mean the devil is nearby, they're the devil himself, or, some variation of that, basically. Effectively, you're not in for a good time if you see a black dog at night, or, a black dog with fiery red eyes. Shockingly, I know. But yes, as I said, today we're going to be focusing more on black dogs in Britain in particular. So there's kind of three I suppose, famous stories regarding black dogs in Britain. And the three of them, I suppose, are the Black Shuck of East Anglia, which will be the focus of today's episode. This is a legendary dog said to roam the coastline and countryside of East Anglia. It's often described as a large, shaggy black dog with fiery eyes. So, yeah, basically, what else can I say about it? It's, this large, shaggy black dog with fiery eyes. That is terrifying in itself. I will touch on it more, but just kind of cover other areas. There's the Padfoot and Bogey Beast of Yorkshire. So these are variations of a phantom black dog, basically, within Yorkshire, and they're actually associated with omens of death, which I find quite interesting. So whereas I talked about before that they might be like a sign of the devil or something like that, this specific one in Yorkshire is actually associated as a death omen. And I believe Suze might have actually talked about it in the death omen episode. If not, I'm remembering it from something else. So anyway, I just find quite interesting. And then finally, there's these black dogs associated with churchyards. So they're actually called church grims. And in ancient churchyards, these spectral dogs are seen as death portents, representing a sacrifice or something like that. That's kind of what I saw online, is that they're kind of this folk memory. I saw the description, a folk memory of sacrifice, or of a sacrifice. So I think these kind of more represent like loss, or just kind of inherent sadness, and that someone in the area has maybe lost someone, or that there's been a death or something like that. So these are kind of, I think, inherently sadder. They represent kind of that loss, as I said, whereas the other was kind of a death omen, kind of, you're going to die, or someone close to you is going to die. These other church grims are more kind of in line with like someone has already died. They just represent that kind of inherent sadness that comes with death and loss. So before we get into the main kind of story, kind of some characteristics around these black dogs and the phenomena around them is that some of these black dogs could be like shape-shifting. Shape-shifting demon dogs is what I saw. So it's a type of black dog that changes its form. It's pretty on the head. Some of them are said to be kind of the size of a small cow or a calf. So like it's quite large actually. And that they're associated with ancient pagan or Celtic festivals, and that they've kind of appeared throughout time in there as well, and that's kind of the link to them. So as you'll have seen from the episode title, we are talking about the Black Shuck incident. So the Black Shuck is a really cool actually event that occurred on the 4th of August 1577, and this was said to, like all good classic kind of paranormal or ghost stories, it took place during a severe thunderstorm, which immediately, great setting, love it. Very similar to the Loftus Hall story, where again took place during a thunderstorm, one of the worst storms that we'd ever seen in Ireland. Again here in 1577 we've got a severe thunderstorm, and the townsfolk of this area were gathered in St. Mary's Church, and amidst the darkness and the tempest kind of roaring outside, a monstrous black dog, later known as the Black Shuck, is said to have burst through the church doors to the sound of a mighty clap of thunder. So just kind of place yourself in this congregation in a church. I suppose maybe they've gathered in this holy place of worship for fear of the storm that was outside, maybe praying for protection or something like that. While this is happening, they're gathered there, probably feeling quite nervous. This humongous dog bursts through the door. The the beast allegedly ran up the middle of the church, running straight past the congregation, and in its wake, as I saw described online, it only left tragedy. So a man and a boy were reportedly killed by the creature, and along with this, for some reason, the church steeple is also said to have collapsed through the roof, which, you know, if you believe in omens, that's probably not a good sign that this dog turns up, 2 people die, and the church steeple collapsed through the roof. But the chaos didn't actually end there. The Black Shuck then actually moved on to another church about 12 miles away, where it continued its rampage, allegedly actually mauling and killing people. So the local accounts from the time attribute this terrifying event to the devil, which I find fascinating. And there's that kind of link there with Ireland, I suppose, in that sense, the black dog being the sign of the devil. And allegedly, there were actually scorch marks on the door of the second church, the Blithburg church. They're still there apparently to this day, and they're referred to by the locals as the devil's fingerprints. So I absolutely love that. I think that's phenomenal that these scorch marks have remained to the day. It doesn't matter whether or not it's true or not, but that's what the locals call them. So that's what they are, the devil's fingerprints. I actually saw a really cool verse online that pretty much kind of captured the horror, I suppose, as it unfolded. So it says, "All down the church, in midst of fire, the hellish monster flew, and passing onward to the choir, he many people slew." So I do love that. I think it pretty much captures exactly what happens. Bursts through the door in fire, runs through the church, and kills people in his path, basically. So the Black Shuck has basically had this lasting impact on this particular region in England, and it's actually become embedded as some part of iconography of the area and has influenced various aspects of local culture, from the names of clubs and businesses to annual events like the Black Shuck Festival that commemorate the incident. So there's kind of been some modern interpretations kind of saying that the event was just a lightning strike on the church. That kind of explains everything. The legend of the Black Shuck has actually remained quite a powerful story in the folklore of the region, and it's kind of taken on this sort of blending of historical events with supernatural elements to kind of create the tale that we now have today. And it's effectively endured for what is the better part of 4 centuries. So I'm going to just briefly touch on some kind of background, origin, and theories of the Black Shuck before we kind of conclude the episode. So there's kind of some like folklore / mythological theories and origins about the Black Shuck and where it kind of first comes into history. So the 2 main ones are, there's an Old English origin to it. So the name Shuck allegedly derives from the Old English word skukka, meaning devil or fiend. So that immediately suggests this kind of demonic, devilish origin, which is quite on the head, but you know, I suppose if you're looking at it that way, it's literally called like the Black Devil or the Black Fiend, which is pretty cool. Great band name, actually, to be fair. So that's the Old English origin. Then there's also allegedly a Viking influence, which I think just makes this even more metal than it needs to be. So the Viking influence says that the story of Black Shuck could actually be a remnant of the old Scandinavian myth of the Black Hound of Odin, which was brought to East Anglia through culture with the Vikings, which I love. So there's this kind of, it's pretty self-explanatory, this theory that the Vikings brought the story of the Black Hound of Odin and that it somehow managed to effectively stay alive in folklore and culture all the way through history, which I love. So, you know, like we're talking hundreds of years between the Vikings and this occurrence in 1577, and now again another 400 or 500 years since then to modern times. It's still around, which I just love. You know, and I think if anything that might be a more believable origin is that it's just kind of adapted and changed throughout the time. So there's some more interesting theories then, which I love. So I suppose more like cultural in a sense. So there's the theory of the Wild Hunt, which is basically a very early surviving description of a devilish black hound in Peterborough Abbey around 1127, which describes a wild hunt. So it's a phenomenon known across Central, Western and Northern Europe of this kind of howling winds associated with a hunt basically taking place, this kind of like spectral hunt where it's this kind of like mythological pack of hunters or hounds kind of going through the sky, taking part in some grand hunt, like hunting something hunting down effectively. And there's a theory that the Black Shuck could be part of this pack of mythological hunters and hounds effectively, that it's somehow managed to become real through some occurrence. And then finally, as I touched on earlier, there's another kind of cultural origin to this, in that black dogs in folklore often symbolize death or serve as some sort of symbol of the supernatural, but a kind of more sinister supernatural. So people kind of explain that this is why the Black Shuck appears in like churchyards, graveyards, that sort of stuff, because they kind of represent this kind of symbolic kind of role in death, pretty much. And you know, that's exactly what churches represent, I suppose, is that kind of balance between life and death. And so then just finally, the Black Shuck is just this theory effectively that still kind of just hangs around. You know, people allegedly do believe in this, you know, that there's been sightings all throughout history. People do say that it did happen. And I thought I'd just include one modern sighting of the Black Shuck as a way to round out the episode. So reports have continued to describe encounters with this large, shaggy black dog with glowing red or fiery eyes. In its wake, it's often associated with feelings of doom or misfortune. The sightings are usually kind of not that frequent, but they do still occur. And in recent times, sightings have been reported in some locations, but particularly along the coastal areas and in churchyards. So exactly following the historical sighting kind of pattern. But in Norfolk, I think the town of Sheringham, there's been multiple sightings of the Black Shuck along beaches and cliffs, especially during stormy or foggy weather. So these kind of modern sightings have occurred late at night or early in the morning, and the creature is said to disappear without a trace. Some have even said that it disappears into thin air, basically. I just find these really interesting that this is still kind of occurring to the modern day. So yeah, as I said, witnesses have described this large dog with glowing red eyes around the cliffs during storms and fog, which is when it was first sighted, I suppose. It kind of, this all tracks. And the legend has it basically that the tracks of the Black Shuck have, like, when they somehow managed to have been followed, led into the grounds of a Grand Hall near Sheringham, which is allegedly where Sir Arthur Conan Doyle visited sometime around 1901, 1900, and after hearing about all this, went off and wrote about the Hound of the Baskervilles, which I love. I think that's great. But yeah, from what I've seen, the Black Shuck seems to very much still be alive in this region, regardless of whether it's real or not. It's real in people's folklore, and I love that. I think it's just so cool that people know it's a supernatural story, it's supernatural origins, of course it is. But for some reason, it's managed to become intertwined with local folklore, and in that sense, it's very much so kept alive, regardless of how you feel about it. It still exists in the local stories, the local history, and it's just been intertwined now with the culture of the area. And it's, yeah, as far as people are concerned, it doesn't matter if it's real or not. It's real in the sense of it's become this created icon. And I just think it's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. But yeah, that kind of concludes today's story. You know, I'd really love to hear what you think about this one. I think it's fascinating. And as I said, like growing up as a child in Ireland, you do hear stories about black dogs being the embodiment of the devil or some sort of bad luck omen. So I'd love to hear if you have had these experiences as well growing up, or even now if you still hear about it. You know, did you have these same stories, these same kind of omens, or did you have something different? I'd love to hear about it. And if you've seen one of these black dogs, I would especially love to hear about it. You can reach out to us on Instagram at the spookyaf pod, or you can email us at the spookyafpodcast@gmail.com. I'd love to read out some of your sightings, some of your theories about this, and maybe make it as part of a larger main episode with Suze. But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I hope whenever it is that you're listening to it, you're having a lovely day, and you've just enjoyed this tiny little snack-sized bite into the paranormal. Yeah, hope you all have a lovely day, and I'll see you in the next one, guys. Bye.